"I'm not worth the trouble," she cried, the cowboy said. "You're worth everything I have." The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, golden shadows over the dusty streets of the small Texas town. Clara sat in the back of the old, rattling bus, her hands wrapped tightly around a worn leather suitcase. Every bump of the road reminded her of how far she had traveled, not just in miles, but in life. She wasn't sure why she had come here, to a town she had never visited where she knew no one, but something inside her whispered that she needed a fresh start. Somewhere, somehow, she could leave her mistakes behind and try to find herself again. Her heart felt heavy as she watched the town's outskirts draw closer. The buildings were old, with paint peeling from the wooden walls and signs swaying in the gentle afternoon wind. A small diner, a hardware store, and a single gas station made up most of the town's center. There was a kind of quiet here that felt both comforting and intimidating, as if the town itself was waiting to see if she belonged. Clara took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her chest. She wasn't just arriving in a new place. She was arriving in a new life, or at least she hoped she was. When the bus screeched to a stop, Clara stepped onto the dirt road and felt the heat of the late afternoon sun on her face. She adjusted the strap of her bag and tried to steady her shaking hands. People passed by in slow, deliberate movements, some nodding politely, others staring briefly before looking away. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, and outsiders like her were a rare sight. She kept her gaze straight ahead, not wanting to draw too much attention, but she couldn't help noticing how different this place felt from the city she had left behind. The air smelled of dust, leather, and wild grass, and the sound of distant cattle made her feel both uneasy and strangely at peace. Clara started walking, unsure of where to go first. She knew she needed a place to stay, and she had heard about a small ranch on the edge of town that sometimes offered work in exchange for room and board. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get her started. As she walked, her mind wandered back to the past few years of her life, each memory like a shadow that refused to leave her. Mistakes, heartbreaks, and decisions she wished she could undo crowded her thoughts. She had always been careful to hide her pain, to smile even when her heart ached, but it had grown heavier over time, until she felt it pressing down on her chest with every step she took. The ranch came into view, a modest wooden structure surrounded by fields of dry grass and a few scattered barns. The fence was worn but sturdy, and the smell of hay and animals filled the air. Clara hesitated for a moment at the edge of the property, unsure if she should knock or just turn away. She had never been good at asking for help, and the thought of being rejected or laughed at made her stomach twist. But then a figure appeared from behind one of the barns, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the calm confidence of someone who belonged to the land. His hat shaded his face, but when he lifted it slightly and offered a small smile, Clara felt a strange sense of relief. "You looking for work?" he asked, his voice steady and warm. Clara nodded, her words caught in her throat. She wanted to explain everything about herself, why she had come, what she hoped to leave behind, but the words felt too heavy. Instead, she simply held out her suitcase and whispered, I need a place to stay." The cowboy nodded, as if he understood more than she had said. "Well, we've got a spare room. It's not much, but it'll do for now. Come on, I'll show you." As she followed him, Clara couldn't help but notice the ease with which he moved, the way he seemed to be at home in the open fields and under the wide sky. There was a quiet strength about him, the kind of person who didn't need to say much to make others feel safe. His name was Jack, he explained, and he had lived on the ranch for most of his life, taking care of the land and the animals just as his father had before him. He didn't ask her about her past, didn't press her for details, and in that moment, Clara realized how rare that was. The small house at the edge of the ranch was simple but welcoming. The wooden floors creaked under her feet, and sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes that floated lazily in the air. Jack showed her the room she would be staying in, a modest space with a single bed, a dresser, and a small desk. It wasn't much, but it was clean and quiet, and Clara felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Over the next few days, Clara began to settle into the rhythm of ranch life. She learned how to feed the animals, mend fences, and handle the chores that kept the place running. It was hard work, and her muscles ached in ways she hadn't felt in years, but there was a kind of satisfaction in it too. Each task, no matter how small, reminded her that she was capable of more than she had believed. And through it all, Jack was there, not watching her every move, not judging, just present, offering quiet encouragement when she faltered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara found herself sitting on the porch steps, watching the cattle graze in the fading light. Jack joined her, leaning against the railing with a thoughtful expression. "It's peaceful out here," he said, his voice carrying easily in the cool evening air. Clara nodded, unsure if she could speak without her voice trembling. It's different from anywhere I've been." Jack smiled softly. "Sometimes a place like this, it gives you a chance to start over, not because the past doesn't matter, but because the future is still yours." Her chest tightened at his words. She wanted to believe him, she really did, but the fear that she wasn't worthy of a fresh start kept her silent. All she could do was watch the sky darken, the first stars beginning to appear, and hope that somehow this small town, this quiet ranch, could help her find herself again. The next morning, Clara woke before sunrise, the soft pink light spilling into her room. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, the cool air brushing against her face. The world felt new, alive with possibility. She watched as Jack moved through the fields, tending to the animals with practiced ease. There was something steady and dependable about him, something that made her believe that perhaps, just perhaps, people could be trusted again. As the days passed, Clara started to feel a shift inside herself. The fear and guilt that had weighed her down for so long began to ease, replaced by small moments of joy. Watching a calf take its first steps, feeling the wind whip through the open fields, sharing quiet conversations with Jack at the end of the day. Each moment reminded her that life could be gentle, even after hardship. Yet, even as she began to heal, Clara knew that trust was fragile, that one wrong word or gesture could shatter the fragile sense of security she was building. She guarded her heart, careful not to let anyone in too deeply. But there was something about Jack, a patience, a quiet understanding, that made it difficult to keep the walls she had built so high. He didn't rush her, didn't push her to speak before she was ready. And in that patience, she began to see a glimmer of hope that perhaps she was capable of love and acceptance after all. The small Texas town, with its dusty streets, old wooden buildings, and endless sky, had become more than just a stop on her journey. It was a place of beginnings, of healing, and of quiet possibilities. And as Clara sat on the porch one evening, the wind carrying the scent of grass and hay, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found somewhere she could finally belong. Clara had begun to settle into the rhythm of life on the ranch, but even as she found comfort in the routine, the fear of being hurt or judged still lingered in the corners of her mind. Every time she caught herself laughing or feeling light for even a moment, she worried that the walls she had built around her heart were too thin, that her past might catch up with her and destroy this fragile peace. She worked hard during the day, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and learning the quiet ways of the land. But at night, when the chores were done, she sometimes found herself alone with her thoughts, the weight of her past pressing down on her chest once more. Jack, ever patient, seemed to understand. He didn't force her to talk about herself, didn't press her to reveal the secrets she was afraid to share. Instead, he offered small gestures of kindness that said more than words ever could. Some mornings, she would find a cup of coffee waiting for her on the porch, steam rising gently in the crisp dawn air. Other times, he would walk beside her as she fed the animals, his presence steady and calm, giving her the courage to face tasks that had once felt overwhelming. Slowly, day by day, Clara began to realize that trust was not built in grand gestures, but in the small, quiet acts of consistency and care. One afternoon, Jack asked her to help him with a new project, repairing the old barn roof. It was a challenging task, one that required patience, balance, and teamwork. At first, Clara hesitated, afraid of making mistakes or slowing him down, but Jack reassured her with a gentle smile. "We'll take it step by step. Don't worry about being perfect," he said. As they worked side by side, the sunlight glinting off the metal roof and the wind tugging at their clothes, Clara felt a strange sense of freedom. Up there, high above the ground, the worries of her past seemed distant, and the quiet encouragement in Jack's voice made her feel capable of more than she had imagined. She laughed when she lost her balance, and he laughed too, his deep, steady voice echoing across the field. For the first time in years, Clara felt lighter, as if some invisible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. After the work was done, they sat on the edge of the roof, their feet dangling over the side, watching the sun slowly dip toward the horizon. The sky was a canvas of oranges, pinks, and purples, and for a moment the world felt perfectly still. Clara found herself speaking without thinking, telling Jack small stories from her past, childhood memories, little adventures, moments of embarrassment or joy. She spoke carefully, holding back the heaviest burdens, but even sharing these small pieces of herself felt like a step forward. Jack listened quietly, nodding and smiling, never interrupting, never judging. When she finished a story, he would respond with gentle observations or quiet humor, making her feel seen and understood. It was a new experience for Clara, one that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Trust was not something she had allowed herself in years, and yet here she was, opening up, laughing and feeling a connection that she had thought was impossible. As the days passed, their bond grew. Clara began to notice the little things, how Jack would remember exactly how she liked her coffee, or how he would quietly repair tools she had broken, never making her feel clumsy or incapable. He shared stories of his own life on the ranch, tales of growing up under the vast Texas sky, learning from his father, and the quiet satisfaction of working with one's hands. Listening to him, Clara felt a sense of stability she hadn't realized she craved. There was a quiet power in his steadiness, a strength that didn't demand attention but inspired respect and trust. Despite these moments of comfort, Clara's fears never fully disappeared. Some nights when the ranch was quiet and the stars glittered in the vast sky above, she would lie awake, heart racing, imagining that she wasn't worthy of happiness or love. Memories of past mistakes haunted her, whispering that she didn't deserve this chance at a fresh start. She wondered if Jack would see her as she truly was and, like everyone else before him, turn away. One particularly hot afternoon, Clara found herself working in the field, the sun beating down relentlessly. Sweat ran down her back and she wiped her forehead with a sleeve, feeling exhausted and discouraged. Jack noticed her struggle and came over, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're doing great," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Take a break if you need to." "No one expects you to do everything at once." Clara shook her head, tears pricking at her eyes. I can't seem to do anything right. Every time I try, it feels like I fail." Jack knelt beside her, looking into her eyes with a seriousness that made her heart skip a beat. "Listen to me, Clara. You're not failing, you're learning. And even when you make mistakes, it doesn't make you any less important or strong or capable." For a moment, she wanted to argue, to retreat back behind the walls she had built. But something in his gaze, something in the way he spoke, made her pause. She had never felt anyone see her like this before, not her faults, not her fears, but the person underneath, the one who was still trying, still fighting, still worthy of care and love. Their bond deepened not just through work and shared moments, but also through silence. There were evenings when they sat together on the porch without speaking, simply watching the sun set or the stars emerge in the darkening sky. In those quiet times, Clara realized that connection didn't always need words. Sometimes it was in the shared presence, the steady comfort of someone who didn't demand more than she could give, but accepted her fully as she was. Then one evening, a sudden storm rolled in, the wind whipping across the plains and lightning flashing in the distance. The animals grew restless, and Jack moved quickly, rounding up the cattle and leading them into the barn. Clara followed, helping where she could, her heart racing as the storm thundered around them. After the last animal was safe, they stood together in the barn, soaked from the rain, laughing breathlessly at the chaos of it all. "You know," Jack said, smiling, "storms aren't so bad when you face them with someone else." Clara looked at him, her chest tightening with a mixture of fear and longing. For the first time, she felt a desire to believe him, to trust that perhaps she could face more than just storms, maybe even her past, without being crushed by it. Over the next weeks, Clara continued to grow in confidence. She began to take on more responsibilities on the ranch, learning to care for the animals independently and manage the chores without constant guidance. Each success, no matter how small, built her self-esteem and chipped away at the self-doubt that had haunted her for years. She discovered that she was capable of hard work, patience, and care, qualities she had once undervalued in herself. Even as Clara began to open up, there were moments when the past still intruded. Memories of failed relationships, mistakes she couldn't undo, and choices that had hurt others came creeping in during quiet moments. But Jack remained steady, never pushing, never judging, only offering a presence that was constant and reassuring. Slowly, she realized that while she couldn't erase the past, she could choose how she let it define her. She could allow herself to heal, to grow, and to experience happiness again. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Clara found herself sitting beside Jack near the edge of the field, watching the cattle graze. The warm glow of the sunset lit his face, and for a moment she felt a surge of emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Gratitude, relief, and a flicker of hope mingled together in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered almost to herself. Jack turned to her, his gaze steady and kind. "For what?" "For just being here," she said. "For not giving up on me when I've spent so long giving up on myself." He smiled softly, a gentle warmth in his eyes. "You don't have to thank me, Clara. You've done all the hard work. I've just been here to remind you that you're capable of more than you realize." That evening, as Clara lay in bed, she reflected on the past weeks. The ranch had become more than just a place to stay. It had become a place of growth, trust, and quiet hope. She was learning to believe in herself again, to accept the possibility that life could be gentle and kind, and that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of care, love, and happiness. The days blended into weeks, each one a small step forward. Clara's laughter became more frequent, her smiles less guarded, and her confidence slowly returned. She discovered strength she hadn't known she possessed, not just in her work but in her willingness to face fear, to trust, and to open her heart even just a little. And through it all, Jack remained her steady companion, a silent reminder that love and trust weren't about grand declarations or dramatic gestures. They were about presence, patience, and the quiet courage to keep showing up, day after day. Clara's life on the ranch had become a rhythm she could depend on. Each morning, she rose with the sun, tending to the animals, mending fences, and learning to navigate the wide-open fields with confidence she hadn't felt in years. She had begun to feel that perhaps this town, this quiet ranch, could be a home, not just a temporary stop on a journey of escape, but a place where she could belong. And yet, despite the comfort of routine and the steady presence of Jack, she couldn't shake the shadow of her past. For weeks, she had managed to push it aside, focusing on the tasks at hand, letting the work, the sun, and the stars occupy her mind. But life has a way of reminding us that the past never fully disappears. One morning, as she was feeding the chickens, a horse-drawn wagon appeared at the edge of the property. A man stepped down, his posture sharp and his eyes scanning the ranch with a calculating air. Clara felt a chill creep down her spine as recognition struck her like a blow. It was someone from her past, someone she had hoped to leave behind forever. Memories she had buried, pain, shame, and mistakes, resurfaced instantly, gripping her chest in panic. The man's gaze lingered on her for a long moment, and she knew that whatever secrets she had tried to keep hidden were no longer safe. She had always feared that this day might come, that someone from the life she had escaped would find her and drag her back into the world she had fought so hard to leave behind. Jack, noticing her sudden stillness, walked over. "Clara." "What's wrong?" he asked, concern etched in his face. She hesitated, unable to speak at first, her throat tight with fear. The man from her past was moving closer, and she realized she had no way to stop him. It's him," she finally whispered, voice shaking. From before." Jack's expression didn't change, but his hand moved to gently cover hers, a quiet reassurance that he was here. "Then we face him together," he said firmly. "You're not alone." The man introduced himself formally, but there was no kindness in his tone. His questions were probing, his words edged with threats, hinting at the mistakes Clara had made and the secrets she had hoped would stay buried. Clara felt panic rising, a familiar wave of guilt and shame that threatened to undo all the progress she had made. Her chest tightened, her hands trembled, and tears threatened to spill over. I don't want any trouble," she said, her voice barely audible. "Please, just go." But the man didn't leave. He lingered, reminding her of the past she had worked so hard to escape. Clara's first instinct was to retreat, to push Jack away before he could see the full extent of her flaws. She didn't want him to know the worst parts of her life, the mistakes, the regrets, the choices that had caused pain. And so, in a surge of fear and self-loathing, she stepped back from him, shaking, her tears falling freely. "You should leave," she whispered, her voice breaking. You don't need to deal with me. You don't deserve this. I'm not worth the trouble." Jack's eyes softened, but he didn't step back. Instead, he moved closer, kneeling in front of her, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Clara," he said, his voice calm but firm, "look at me. You are worth everything I have. I don't care about the past. I don't care about the mistakes. I care about you. That's who I see." Her hands went to her face, shaking, as if trying to hide herself from the world. She wanted to believe him desperately, but years of guilt and fear had taught her to doubt every word of kindness offered to her. She had been hurt too many times, left too many times, and the thought of trusting someone with her heart again terrified her. And yet the sincerity in his eyes, the quiet strength in his words, made her hesitate. She wanted to step away, to hide, but something deep inside urged her to listen, to believe, even if only for a moment. The confrontation with her past lasted the rest of the day. Jack stayed by her side, silent when she couldn't speak, patient when she couldn't control her emotions. The man finally left, but the shadow of fear and shame lingered in Clara's heart. That night she locked herself in her room, refusing to face anyone, convinced that she had ruined everything. She had pushed Jack away with her words, convinced that she was not worthy of the love and trust he had offered so freely. Days passed, and Clara avoided him as best she could, keeping her distance while still performing her duties on the ranch. She threw herself into the work, trying to distract herself from the fear and guilt that gnawed at her. But no matter how hard she worked, she could not shake the memory of Jack's eyes, the steady patience, and the gentle insistence that she was worthy of care. Jack, on the other hand, did not give up. He understood that Clara needed time, that her fears were deeply rooted and not easily overcome. He respected her space, but he remained near, quietly repairing fences, tending to the animals, and leaving small gestures of kindness that reminded her she was not alone. Sometimes he would leave a cup of water where he knew she would find it, or a note with a few words of encouragement. Each act, though small, chipped away at the walls she had rebuilt around her heart. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of deep purple and gold, Clara found herself sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon. The wind carried the scent of grass and earth, and the ranch was quiet except for the distant sounds of animals settling in for the night. Jack joined her silently, not speaking at first, simply sitting beside her. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice trembling. "I don't know why I keep pushing you away," she said. I want to trust you, but I'm afraid that if you really knew me, you'd leave." Jack reached over, gently taking her hand. "Clara, we all have things we regret. We all have pasts we wish we could change. That doesn't make you unworthy. It makes you human. I see you, all of you, and I'm not going anywhere. But you have to let me in. You have to let yourself believe that you deserve this, that you deserve care, love, and happiness." Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she buried her face in her hands. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let go of the guilt and fear that had haunted her for years. Slowly, she felt herself relax under his steady presence, the weight in her chest beginning to lift. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she could be happy, where she could trust, and where she could belong. Over the next few days, Clara began to take small steps toward opening up fully. She shared stories of her past, carefully at first, revealing only the parts she felt ready to show. Jack listened without judgment, offering comfort, understanding, and reassurance. Each story she told was like a small victory, proof that she could face her fears without being destroyed by them. One afternoon, Jack took her to the edge of the property, where the land stretched out into endless fields of golden grass. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of wildflowers and earth. He showed her the view, explaining how he had spent hours here as a child, learning about the land, observing the animals, and dreaming of a life that would allow him to live with honesty and integrity. Clara listened, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. "You see," Jack said softly, "life isn't about hiding from the past. It's about facing it, learning from it, and moving forward. You can't change what's behind you, but you can choose what comes next. And I want to face it with you every step of the way." Clara felt her heart swell with emotion. She wanted to believe him, and slowly, cautiously, she began to. She realized that trust wasn't about being perfect or having a flawless past. It was about being seen, accepted, and supported despite imperfections. And in Jack, she had found someone who offered exactly that: unwavering patience, understanding, and care. That evening, as they watched the sunset together, Clara finally allowed herself to lean on him. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth and steady presence she had longed for. For the first time in years, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she was worthy of love and happiness. But the memory of her past visitor still lingered in the back of her mind. Clara knew that the challenges were not over, that she would face moments of doubt and fear again. Yet for the first time, she felt capable of facing them, not alone, but with someone who truly saw her, believed in her, and refused to let her face life's storms by herself. In that quiet moment, as the sky darkened and stars began to emerge, Clara understood something vital. Love was not about perfection or a life without mistakes. It was about courage, the courage to face fear, to trust, and to allow oneself to be vulnerable. And in Jack, she had found both the courage and the reassurance she needed to step forward, no longer running from her past, but ready to build a future. The days after Clara faced the visitor from her past were quieter, but they were not easy. The tension that had gripped her heart slowly began to loosen, replaced by a tentative hope. She continued to work on the ranch, her movements more confident, her mind clearer. But she knew the real work was not just caring for animals or mending fences. It was learning to care for herself, to trust that she could be worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Jack remained by her side, patient as always, his presence a quiet but steady reassurance. He did not push her to talk about her fears, nor did he demand immediate forgiveness for the years she had been hard on herself. Instead, he continued to work alongside her, sharing his quiet wisdom, laughter, and the kind of gentle support that only comes from someone who truly sees another person. One morning, as Clara was gathering eggs from the henhouse, she noticed how the sunlight fell across the fields, the golden light illuminating every blade of grass and flickering shadow. She thought of all the mornings she had spent rushing through life, weighed down by guilt, fear, and uncertainty. And now here she was, standing in the warmth of a new day, a small smile forming on her lips. The sense of freedom, of peace, was almost dizzying. Jack joined her, carrying a bucket of feed. "You're up early," he said with a grin. Clara laughed softly, the sound light and almost musical in the crisp morning air. "I wanted to see the sunrise," she admitted. "It's beautiful." Jack nodded, looking out over the fields with her. "It is. Sometimes the world reminds us that even after storms, light still comes, and it's just as important to notice it as it is to survive the storms themselves." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that Jack's words were more than just a reflection of the land. They were a reflection of life, of the second chances she had been given, and the future that awaited her if she chose to accept it. Slowly, cautiously, she began to allow herself to believe that happiness was not just possible, but within reach. Over the next few weeks, Clara grew stronger, both physically and emotionally. She became more comfortable with the ranch work, learning to anticipate the needs of the animals and the land, discovering a rhythm that brought her confidence. But more importantly, she learned to trust herself and the people around her. She found joy in simple tasks: a calf learning to walk, the smell of fresh hay, the sound of the wind through the grass, and began to recognize that life could be gentle even after hardship. Jack's presence continued to guide her, not in a controlling way, but as a constant reminder that she was not alone. He shared stories from his own life, speaking of his struggles, his mistakes, and the lessons he had learned. Listening to him, Clara understood that everyone carried burdens, that mistakes did not define a person, and that the courage to face life again was what truly mattered. One afternoon, after a long day of work, Jack suggested they take a walk along the ridge that overlooked the ranch. The sun was low in the sky, painting the fields with golden light. As they walked side by side, Clara felt the familiar nervous excitement in her chest, the flutter of something she had not allowed herself to feel in years: hope. "Clara," Jack began, his voice gentle but steady, "I know you've been through a lot. I know it hasn't been easy to trust again, and I understand why. But I want you to know something important. You're worth everything I have. Not because of what you've done or what you've been through, but because of who you are. And I want to face life with you together." Clara's hands trembled as she turned to look at him. His eyes, steady and kind, reflected a sincerity she had longed to see. Her chest tightened with emotion, and she found herself unable to speak. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not tears of fear or shame. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and love. For the first time in years, she felt that she could fully believe in someone, that she could allow herself to be seen and cared for without judgment. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice breaking. You don't have to say anything, Jack replied. Just know that I'm here always. The following days were filled with a quiet, steady happiness. Clara and Jack worked together, laughed together, and shared moments of silence that spoke volumes. She found herself trusting him in ways she had never trusted anyone. She confided her fears, her dreams, and even her hopes for the future. And with every shared story, every gentle gesture, and every day spent side by side, she felt the walls she had built around her heart slowly crumble. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned brilliant shades of pink and gold, Jack led her to a small clearing at the edge of the property. The grass swayed gently in the evening breeze, and the sky above stretched endlessly, dotted with stars beginning to appear. Jack took her hands in his gaze unwavering. "Clara," he said softly, "I know life hasn't been easy. You've carried so much and you've been through storms I can't even imagine. But I see you, all of you, and I want you to know I am not going anywhere. You are worth everything I have, and I want to spend every day proving that to you." Clara felt her heart swell with emotion. For so long, she had believed she was unworthy of love, that her mistakes and regrets made her unfit to be truly happy. But in Jack's words, in his presence, and in the quiet constancy of his care, she felt the truth finally settle in her heart. She was worthy, she was deserving, and she could allow herself to be happy again. Tears flowed freely as she pressed her forehead against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Jack held her close, rocking her gently in his arms. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "You've done all the hard work. I'm just here to remind you that you're stronger than you realize and that you're worth every bit of care and love the world has to offer." From that moment on, Clara's life on the ranch changed. She no longer felt the constant weight of fear or guilt pressing down on her chest. She still carried memories of her past, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they were lessons, reminders of how far she had come and how strong she truly was. The town watched quietly as Clara and Jack grew closer, their bond deepening with each passing day. Neighbors noticed the subtle ways they cared for each other, sharing tools, laughing over small mishaps, supporting each other through work and daily life. It was a quiet, gentle love, one that did not demand attention or recognition, but which radiated warmth and hope to those around them. One particularly golden afternoon, Clara sat on the porch, watching Jack tend to the fields. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers, and the light danced across the grass in shimmering patterns. She felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude, the kind that comes from knowing that, despite life's hardships, she had found a place where she belonged, and a person who believed in her completely. Jack joined her, sitting down beside her without a word. For a while, they simply watched the horizon together, the quiet companionship more meaningful than any conversation could be. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice calm and full of warmth. "I used to think I wasn't worth anything," she said. "I thought my mistakes and my past would follow me forever, but now I see that I'm not defined by that, and I want to build a life here with you if you'll have me." Jack smiled, his eyes shining with sincerity. "I've never had any doubt. You are worth everything to me, Clara, and I promise we'll face whatever comes together side by side." The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Clara and Jack continued their life on the ranch, facing challenges, celebrating successes, and growing closer with each passing day. The small Texas town, with its dusty streets, quiet fields, and endless sky, had become more than just a home. It had become a place of healing, hope, and love. Clara learned that life was not about avoiding storms, but about finding someone to stand beside you when they came. She learned that mistakes did not define her, that courage was found in the act of facing fear, and that love was not about perfection, but about presence, patience, and unwavering care. And in Jack, she found all of these things and more. One evening, as they watched the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Clara rested her head on Jack's shoulder. The wind carried the scent of grass and earth, the stars beginning to appear above. She realized that she was finally home, not just in this town or on this ranch, but in the quiet confidence that she was loved, valued, and worthy of happiness. Jack squeezed her hand gently, his voice soft but firm. "You're worth everything I have, Clara. Don't ever forget that." Clara smiled, tears of joy streaming down her face. "I won't," she whispered. "I finally believe it." And in the warmth of that evening, with the world quiet and wide around them, Clara understood fully that life could be gentle, love could be true, and that sometimes second chances were not just possible. They were exactly what she had been waiting for all along.